I hadn't held a coffee mug properly in weeks. Every morning, the same ritual played out in my little kitchen in Newton, Massachusetts. I'd fumble with the buttons on my cardigan, curse under my breath as the spoon slipped from my swollen fingers, and then sit down in silence, cradling a heat pad like it was my last comfort. My name is Nora Wells. I'm 68 years old, widowed for nearly 2 decades. And up until recently, I still believed I could take care of everything on my own. But arthritis doesn't care how independent you are. The New England weather had turned bitter, damp. Gray mornings crawled through the cracks of my well-kept home. Even with the heat on, the chill clung to my bones like bad memories. I used to spend hours in the garden. Now, just lifting a kettle was a test of will. It started mildly 5 years ago, just some stiffness after waking up. Nothing a little Tylenol and a cup of tea couldn't solve. But this year, it was different. Some days, I couldn't even twist the cap off my arthritis cream. I tried not to complain. People had it worse. But pain has a way of wearing down even the proudest people. On a dreary Thursday morning, with rain tapping against the windows like impatient fingers, I wrapped myself in a scarf and made my way to the city. I had an appointment at Massachusetts General Hospital with Dr. Dowley, Elisa Graham, the rheumatologist I'd been seeing for months. Each visit felt like a rerun. She'd examine my hands, note the swelling, frown thoughtfully, and prescribe a slightly stronger pill. But that morning was different. Her smile faded faster than usual. "Nora," she said softly, placing her hand on mine. "We're running out of time. If we don't change course now, you may lose permanent mobility in your hands." I sat there, frozen not from fear, but from the weight of those words. Mobility. Independence. Everything I still had, hanging by a thread. And in that cold exam room, I realized I was going to need help. Real help. But I had no idea the price it would cost me. "Doctor." Graham slid a glossy pamphlet across the desk. On the cover, smiling seniors walking through autumn leaves. A woman lifting her grandson high above her head. "This is a new generation of biologic therapy," she said. "It won't just dull the pain. It could slow down the progression significantly." I flipped through the pages. Words like transformational, life-changing, and mobility restored leapt out at me. It sounded like a miracle. Finally, a light at the end of the tunnel. "But, Doctor," Graham added gently, "it's expensive. Very expensive." That light dimmed in an instant. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She named a number. My stomach turned. "Shaba. Ling. Your Medicare plan only covers a small fraction," she continued, her eyes sympathetic but firm. "We've had good results. I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't believe in it." I nodded slowly. Not because I agreed, but because my brain was trying to do the math. I had about $13. Oh, zero saved. That was my rainy day fund. The money Jack and I had slowly built over the years. Money I'd set aside in case the roof caved in. Or I needed in-home care someday. I could try to get a loan, but banks don't love lending to retirees on fixed incomes. Sell something, maybe? But outside of my house? I didn't own anything valuable, and selling the house felt like cutting off a lifeline. There was one option left. My son, Tyler Wells, 39, manager at an insurance firm in Cambridge, married with 2 kids, Gracie and Ethan. He had a good job, a stable income, a lot of expenses. 2. Sure, but hadn't I always been there when he needed me? The braces, the college tuition gap, the down payment for their first home. I'd helped with it all. Quietly. Willingly. Now, maybe it was time to ask? Not for much. Just a little help to bridge the gap. I stared out the rain-streaked window on the train ride home, clutching the pamphlet like it was a lifeline. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd make the call. I just hoped he would pick up. The next evening, I stood outside Tyler's two-story colonial in Cambridge, clutching a tote bag filled with medical documents and that same brochure. Through the front window, I could see Vanessa rushing around the kitchen, Gracie doing homework at the counter, and Ethan sprawled out in front of the television with a game controller in hand. The door opened before I could knock. Mom Combe and Vanessa smiled, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Tyler just got home. He's in the den. I stepped inside, the warm smell of roasted chicken filling the air. For a brief moment, it felt like any other visit. Normal. Comfortable. But nothing about this visit was normal. After dinner, once the kids were upstairs and Vanessa disappeared into the kitchen to finish cleaning, Tyler and I finally had a moment alone. He leaned back on the couch. Beer in hand. The sound of sports highlights faint in the background. You seem a little off tonight, he said. Everything okay? I took a deep breath and pulled out the brochure. I went to see Dr. Graham yesterday. She says we're at a turning point. There's a new treatment. But it's expensive. He took the pamphlet, scanning it with furrowed brows. When I told him the cost, he let out a low whistle. 18 grand, wow. I've saved 13. I said, but I'm short. About 5. Tyler set the brochure on the table and looked at me for a long moment. Okay, he said. We can figure this out. I'll look into some co-financing programs for seniors, maybe even grants. And if that doesn't work, I'll help cover the rest. Relief flooded through me. There's another thing, he added. To keep it simple, why don't we open a joint account? You transfer your savings into it. I'll add what's needed, and I'll handle all the billing and payments. Less for you to worry about. I hesitated. My nest egg. My independence. But he was my son, and he was trying to help. Okay, I said softly. Let's do it tomorrow. Great, he smiled, reaching for his laptop. We'll make this easy. In that moment, I believed him, and I believed everything would finally be okay. 2 days after the bank visit, I called the clinic to schedule my first injection. We'll need confirmation of payment before we proceed, the receptionist said politely. Of course, I replied, already pulling out my phone. My son will take care of it. I called Tyler. No answer. Maybe he was busy. I sent him a quick text and a gentle reminder to contact the clinic. No reply. That evening, I tried again. Nothing. Vanessa didn't answer either. It was strange. She always picked up. The next morning, I opened Facebook, something I'd only started using to keep up with the grandkids. As I scrolled, I saw a new post from Vanessa. There they were, Tyler, Vanessa, Gracie, and Ethan grinning under palm trees, sipping drinks from coconut shells, smiling wide in the Miami sun. Hashtag family escape. Bahamas bliss. My throat tightened. I enlarged one photo. Tyler was in a beach chair, holding a colorful cocktail, sunglasses on, tan, relaxed. The date was yesterday. I called again. This time, he picked up. Hey, Mom, he said casually. I could hear ocean waves and music in the background. Are you? On vacation. Yeah? We needed a break. It's been in the works for a while. But what about the clinic? They haven't received any payment. I thought Mom. He interrupted, his voice dropping. Look, we'll talk about this when I get back. Okay, now's really not the time. When will you be back? In 10 days. Don't worry so much. A couple weeks won't make a big difference. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. You used my savings. Didn't you? Another pause. Then, flatly, yeah. We needed it. I work hard. The kids are growing up. We haven't had a real vacation in years. But Tyler. That was my treatment money. You'll be fine. Mom. Doctors always exaggerate. You've lived 68 years. What's a few more months of aches? I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I whispered. You stole from me. His voice turned cold. You're being dramatic. We'll sort it out when I'm back. Then he hung up. The silence afterward was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. The brochure lay on the kitchen table, its glossy smiles now looking like cruel jokes. Every time I passed it, I felt sick. I didn't answer phone calls. I didn't open the blinds. The pain in my joints grew worse. But it was nothing compared to the pain in my chest. Tyler, my son, my only child, had stolen from me. And worse, he didn't even seem sorry. On the 4th day, there was a knock at the door. I ignored it, but it came again. And again? Finally, I opened it to find Marjorie Cole, my oldest friend, standing on my porch, holding a bag of groceries, and a look that said she knew everything. You look terrible, she said without judgment. Pushing past me into the kitchen, she put on the kettle, unpacked apples, bread, cheese, talking the whole time like we were in our 20s again. That was Marjorie. No pity, just presence. What happened? She asked. And I told her. About the diagnosis. About the money. About Tyler. About Miami. Tears slipped down my cheeks, not from shock anymore, but grief. Marjorie didn't say much at first. She just listened, occasionally squeezing my hand. Then she looked me square in the eye. You know, Nora, I love you, but you spoiled that boy rotten. He's always been entitled, and you've always cleaned up his messes. I wanted to defend him, but I couldn't. You gave him everything, she continued, even when he didn't earn it. And now, he thinks he can take anything, without asking. Her words stung, but they were true. Then she said something that stayed with me. Maybe it's time you stop thinking of him as your son and start thinking of yourself as your own person again. That night, I sat in the dark, holding a cup of tea Marjorie had made. Me fingers tremble, not just from arthritis, but from the realization that I'd spent my entire life giving. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to take something back. The next morning, I woke up with a new kind of clarity. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was awake. Awake to the truth of who my son had become. And awake to the fact that if I didn't act now, he'd take more than just my savings. He'd take my future. And maybe even my legacy. I pulled out a worn business card from my kitchen drawer. Philip Adler, attorney at law. He'd helped me draft my original will after Jack passed. I called the number. Mrs. Wells, he said warmly. I remember you well. What can I help you with? I need to change everything. I replied, I want my grandchildren to have what's left of me. Not my son. The next afternoon, I sat in Philip's quiet office in downtown Boston, surrounded by heavy legal books and the smell of old paper. I told him the story, everything from the arthritis to the Bahamas. He listened carefully, occasionally jotting notes. You're not the first parent I've met in this situation, he said gently. You'd be surprised how many seniors get financially exploited by their own children. But you have every legal right to protect your assets and your legacy. Together, we created a new will. 60% of my estate would go into a trust fund for Gracie and Ethan. It would pay for their college tuition, living expenses, and give them access to the remainder once they turn 25. 40% would go to a non-profit foundation in Massachusetts that provides support for elderly arthritis patients who can't afford care. Tyler would receive nothing. Are you sure about this? Philip asked, sliding the papers toward me. I didn't hesitate. He's already taken more than he deserves. As I signed my name, I felt a strange calm settle over me, like I had just closed a chapter that needed closing long ago. Outside, the Boston streets buzzed with life, but for the first time in months, the noise didn't overwhelm me. I had made a choice, one that honored the people who still showed up, and one that finally honored myself. It didn't take long. Word travels fast in small towns, and even faster in families. I don't know who told Tyler about the will, but 2 days after I signed it, his silver SUV came skidding onto my front lawn like a storm barreling through my peace. He didn't knock. Mom, he shouted, throwing the door open. What the hell is this? I'm hearing about a new will. I stood in the hallway, steadying myself with the banister. It's true, I said calmly. I've changed it. His face turned red. You cut me out. After everything I've done for you, I almost laughed. What exactly have you done for me? Tyler, I asked. Stolen my savings, lied to my face, left me without treatment so you could sip rum in Miami. That's not fair. No. I interrupted. What's not fair is working my whole life, sacrificing for you, and having you throw it away like I'm disposable? He took a step forward. You're doing this out of spite. I'm doing this out of self-respect, I said, my voice unwavering. You made a choice, Tyler, and I'm simply honoring it. His eyes scanned the room like he was looking for something to grab. They landed on the ceramic vase Jack's gift to me on our 10th anniversary. Before I could stop him, he hurled it against the wall. It shattered, just like the last illusion I had of the boy I raised. Get out? I said quietly. What get out? You've broken enough. He froze, then scoffed. Fine. But don't come crying to me when you're sick and alone. I didn't flinch. You left me sick and alone the day you walked onto that beach with my money. Tyler looked like he wanted to say something else, something cruel or cutting, but he didn't. He just turned, slammed the door, and drove off without looking back. I stood there, surrounded by broken porcelain, feeling strangely free, because for the first time in my life, I hadn't backed down. After Tyler left, the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean like the air after a storm. I gathered the shards of the broken vase and tucked them gently into a shoebox. Not because I planned to fix it, but because it deserved better than being swept away like trash. That vase had marked a decade of marriage. Tyler's rage couldn't erase that. With the last of my jewelry pieces, my mother once wore to Sunday service, I walked into a small pawn shop near Harvard Square. The payout wasn't much, but it was enough to begin the first round of treatment. Doctor. Graham was surprised but pleased. You made the right decision, she said, prepping the first injection. You're going to feel like yourself again soon. That night, my fingers ached. But I didn't mind. They ached for a reason for progress. I even managed to boil pasta without spilling it all over the stove. That small victory felt enormous. A few days later, Gracie knocked on my door after school. Mom said I could stay over, she said, hugging her backpack. We spent the afternoon sorting through old photos and drinking cocoa. She asked about my childhood. About Jack. About what Boston was like in the 60s. I saw the curiosity in her eyes, the same spark her father used to have when he was little. I like being here, she said. It's quiet. Safe. She started coming over more often. Some weekends. She brought Ethan too. We baked cookies. Planted tulip bulbs. Watched old black and white movies. The house that once echoed with loneliness now carried the sound of laughter and bubbling saucepans. Then came the call I didn't expect. Vanessa. Her voice was tight. Deliberate. I filed for divorce, she said. I can't do this anymore. He's angry all the time. The kids are scared. I don't want them growing up thinking this is normal. I didn't know what to say. Part of me grieved. Another part admired her courage. You have a home here, I told her. Thank you, she whispered. We might take you up on that. That night, as Gracie and I sat on the porch watching fireflies, I felt something shift. I wasn't just recovering. I was rebuilding. The envelope was thick, official, and cold. I opened it at the kitchen table. Still in my robe, the words leapt from the page like a slap. Petition to declare Nora Wells mentally incompetent. Filed by my own son. I stared at it for a long time. Not breathing. Not crying. Just stunned. Tyler wasn't done with me. He was trying to take everything. That afternoon, I called Philip Adler. He didn't even hesitate. We'll fight this. Nora. And we'll win. The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork and preparation. I took a psychological exam. Met with a social worker. Collected testimonies from Dr. Graham. From the clinic. From neighbors and friends. Marjorie was furious. Hank offered to drive me to court himself. Even Vanessa volunteered to testify along with Gracie. If the judge allowed it. The day of the hearing. The courtroom felt too big. Too polished. I sat at the front. Hands folded. As Tyler walked in with a smug young lawyer in a tailored suit, he didn't look at me. Judge Hartley. Silver-haired and sharp-eyed. Opened the session with a simple phrase. Let's begin. Tyler's lawyer argued that I had become paranoid, delusional, and financially erratic, citing my change of will and donation to a health charity as evidence of declining mental stability. Philip responded with quiet fire. He presented documents, medical evaluations, testimonies, and then he brought up the theft. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Wells accepted $13. Zero from his mother for medical treatment. He then used it to fund a family vacation to Miami. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Vanessa took the stand. So did Dr. Graham. And Gracie, sweet. Brave Gracie looked her father dead in the eye and said, My grandma's the most clear-headed person I know. Dad just wants her money. When the judge returned from deliberation, she didn't waste time. Petition, Denise. This is not a case of mental incompetence. It's a case of financial manipulation. She paused. Looking at Tyler. Mr. Wells. You should be grateful your mother isn't pressing charges. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But inside, something heavy and ancient finally exhaled. Justice wasn't just served. It was reclaimed. A week after the hearing, I returned to Philip Adler's office. I want to revise the will one final time. I said, my voice steady. He looked up. Surprised. After that courtroom victory? Yes. I nodded. This time, I want to make sure Tyler never touches a dime under any circumstances. We updated everything. The trust for Gracie and Ethan remained, as did the donation to the Arthritis Foundation. But we added something new, a clause, stating that if both children were no longer living, my estate would be transferred to a newly formed nonprofit, the Nora Wells Foundation, serving elderly victims of financial abuse. That afternoon, I walked out into the warm June breeze and finally felt light. Not because I'd punished Tyler, but because I'd chosen something bigger than pain. Life. The weeks that followed were full of color. My therapy moved to maintenance mode, fully covered by insurance. I could cook, garden, and even knit again. Gracie graduated middle school with honors. Ethan learned to ride a bike in my driveway. Vanessa found a cozy rental 3 blocks away. Weekends became filled with board games, baking, and lazy Sunday picnics under the maple tree in my backyard. On my 69th birthday, Marjorie insisted on throwing a little garden party. I refuse to let you age quietly, she said with a wink. We strung up lights, grilled burgers, and laughed until our sides hurt. Vanessa brought a cake. Gracie gifted me a handmade scarf. Ethan drew a picture of our family, me, them, and even Hank in the corner with a goofy smile. At sunset, I looked out beyond the hedges and saw him, Tyler, standing alone, half hidden in shadow, watching. Our eyes met for a second. There was no anger left in mine, just acceptance. He nodded slightly, maybe in apology, maybe in defeat, and walked away. Back at the table, Gracie clinked her lemonade glass and raised it. To Grandma, she said. To her strength, and to our real family. Everyone cheered. And as fireflies began to flicker above the lawn, I finally knew I hadn't just survived. I'd rebuilt something better.